listening to Your Secret is Safe with Me, non-judgmental talk about infidelity with Dr. Marie Murphy. If you're looking for new perspectives on complicated relationship issues, you've come to the right place.
Days go by, they're crawling by.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Marie Murphy. This podcast is all about expanding the conversation around infidelity. I'm a relationship coach, and I specialize in helping people who are having affairs make decisions about how to move forward that are truly right for them. On this show, we feature tools and guidance from my coaching practice, as well as advice from other professionals whose work pertains to the sometimes complicated business of romantic relationships. Today, I have the pleasure of talking with John Corcoran of Rise25 once again.
All right, Dr. Murphy, thanks for having me back. So on this topic, in this episode, we're going to be talking about the topic of, are you responsible for other people's feelings? No, you're not. You're not responsible for other people's feelings. Other people have other feelings all the time, and you can't blame yourself. So we're going to hop into that topic in this episode. But first, this episode is brought to you by Marie Murphy, PhD, relationship coaching, which provides shame-free, blame-free, non-judgmental relationship coaching. You can talk with Dr. Murphy about the things that seem too messy or too weird or stigmatized to share with your best friend or your spouse or even your therapist, including but not limited to matters related to infidelity. So to learn more about her relationship coaching practice, go to mariemurphyphd.com. All right, so Dr. Murphy, today we're going to talk about, the extent to which we are responsible for other people's feelings, and really the extent to which other people are responsible for our feelings. So kind of both ways. But before we hop into that, I think it'd probably be helpful to talk again about the definition of feelings so that we're all on the same page here and how that works.
Yeah, for sure. So as I've said in another episode we did, Emotions 101, which I recommend everybody listen to, the most useful definition of a feeling or an emotion that I know of is this. A feeling or an emotion is a set of sensations we experience in our body to which we assign a one-word name. Anger, lust, fear, sadness, anxiety, etc. We tend to think of emotions as cognitive experiences rather than physical experiences. And this has a lot to do with the fact that collectively we're pretty disconnected from our bodies in many ways. And we tend to think that everything that's important within our individual experiences happens in our minds. So we say things like, well, I feel like they hurt my feelings, or I feel like you don't love me anymore, or I feel like that person disrespects me. And those statements are not feelings in and of themselves. Those statements are thoughts. Whatever you feel in your body when you think a particular thought is the feeling. That's why the word emotion is so helpful, because it connotes energy in motion or emotion. So if I were to think to myself, I'm sure my spouse is cheating on me, and if I believe that to be true, I might have a very strong emotional response. I might feel constriction in my chest, or tears in my eyes, or tingling in my arms, or my heart rate go up. I mean, even as I'm just saying this, I'm kind of having an emotional response, even though I don't think that's happening. Or I might have any number of other physical manifestations might come up. And I might name those feelings shock or indignation or revulsion or devastation. And that points to the paradox, which is that although emotions are physical experiences, we describe them with language. We use a one-word name for each emotion that exists. But even though there's a little bit of a paradox there, that doesn't make the definition any less useful. A feeling is a set of sensations in your body to which we can assign a one-word name.
Okay, so it sounds like you're saying that your feelings come from the thought that your spouse is cheating on you, or your belief that your spouse is cheating on you, not the actual fact that your spouse is cheating on you. So what does that mean for our romantic relationships?
Well, I mean, this has implications for our lives as a whole. The important distinction here is that our feelings come from our thoughts, not from our life circumstances. That's not how we tend to think about feelings, though. We tend to think that our feelings are, in fact, caused by our circumstances. We think that if we get a promotion, or if we win the lottery, or if we fall in love, then we feel great. And we might indeed feel great if those things happen, but it's not the occurrence in and of itself that causes our feelings. It's what we think about those experiences that cause our feelings. And this might sound strange because we collectively tend to agree that some circumstances are good and others are bad. We think that winning the lottery or getting a promotion and falling in love are good things. But let's say that you don't really want to be in a relationship, and then you meet someone that you really like. That might seem like a terrible inconvenience to you, not like an unequivocally great occurrence, and thus you might feel conflicted or confused about the relationship. If you think it's bad to have more money than you need, then you might feel angst or unease if you win the lottery. And if you get a promotion at a job you are planning to quit, you could end up feeling indecisive about whether you actually want to quit or not. So the overarching point is that all circumstances are completely neutral until we give them meaning. And give them meaning we do. Humans are meaning-making creatures. We are quick to assign meanings to anything and everything that we experience. And that isn't inherently bad. That's just what we do. The problem, though, is that we usually believe that whatever we are thinking about a given circumstance is the truth of that situation or that circumstance. And when we believe, and if we're believing something about a circumstance that feels terrible, we tend to think that the circumstance has to change in order for us to stop feeling terrible. And this kind of leads us towards the conversation about how this works in romantic relationships. The problem here is that when we believe this, it puts us in a very limited position, or a less powerful position, I should say, because we're not able to control all of the circumstances in our lives. We do, on the other hand, have the power to choose what we think about whatever happens to us in our lives.
All right. So then what does this mean for our romantic relationships?
Yeah, so there's this really prevalent idea out there that the whole point of being in a romantic relationship is for your partner to make you feel good all of the time, or some variation of that theme. And indeed, relationships can be a great source of happiness. But that's due to what you think about your partner and what you think about your relationship. It's not the essential features of who your partner is and what they do or don't do. Your partner doesn't actually cause your feelings by virtue of being who they are, and their behavior does not cause your feelings. It's your thoughts about them and their behavior that create your feelings. And this runs counter to a lot of the conventional wisdom that's out there. There are so many messages about what relationships are supposed to be like and what a good partner is supposed to do, and lots of messages that reinforce the idea that if your partner does certain things, you feel happy, and if they don't do certain things, it's only natural to be outraged or sad or disappointed or whatever. And to an extent, all of this is fine insofar as we're all allowed to have preferences about the parameters of our relationships and what's okay and what's not okay in our relationships. But these kinds of ideas do not serve us insofar as they may lead us to believe that our partner has to do certain things in order for us to feel happy, and that if they do other things that we don't like or don't do the things that we like, then it's only natural for us to be unhappy. If we believe things like this, we're pinning our happiness on things we just can't control. We can certainly make requests of our partners, and I would be the first to say that happy relationships, satisfying relationships, involve consideration and mutual respect and an interest in supporting the other person's well-being, and so on and so on. But there will be times when no matter how wonderful your partner is, they will do things that you don't particularly like. And when that happens, it's important to remember that your perceptions of whatever it is they do or didn't do are yours. The meaning you ascribe to their actions is yours to manage. Whatever it is that you're thinking about, whatever it is they did is what creates your feelings. It's not their actions in and of themselves that made you feel what you're feeling.
So that sounds kind of like an unromantic vision of romantic relationships, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it it certainly challenges some of our notions about how relationships are supposed to be and how they're supposed to work. But if we think that love is predicated upon, another person being right for us and another person doing the things that make us happy, I think we're set up to fail. So I would argue that letting go of the idea that our partner has to make us happy is actually wonderful because it gives us so much more power to enjoy our partner without expecting them to be a certain way or do certain things in order for us to feel good about the relationship. And in a sense, I would argue that's actually more romantic than, the notion that like you have to be like this or you have to do that in order for me to feel good. And it also means that we can handle difficulties in our relationships in a totally different way. If something happens in a relationship that isn't okay with us, it's a lot easier to respond in a way that ultimately brings us closer to living the love life that we want to live if we know that our feelings are our business and our partner's actions are their business.
Okay, so what does this mean then for a situation like infidelity when someone is doing something that's explicitly outside of the bounds of the agreed upon parameters of a relationship?
Well, yeah, first of all, so we as a society have lots of strong beliefs about infidelity. So we as individuals are likely to have absorbed many of these messages and subsequently have pretty strong beliefs about infidelity if it happens in our own lives. So whether we're the person or whatever position we're in within the infidelity equation, whether we're the one who is cheating or the one being cheated on, we're likely to have some very strong beliefs about what's happening to us. And we're likely to believe that our feelings are caused by our circumstances rather than our beliefs about our circumstances, because there are so many messages out there telling us that that's how it works.
Okay, so let's look at both ends of the experience, but let's start with the person who is cheating. So if you have absorbed the idea that cheating is bad, which of course is a pretty common belief, what's likely to be going on for you in that situation?
Okay, here's an example that's pretty common. The person who is cheating believes that the person who is cheating is married. And they believe that they can't leave their marriage because it will devastate their spouse. They think that if they were to ask their spouse for a divorce, their spouse would be emotionally wrecked, and they can't bear the idea of doing that to them. So they stay in the marriage, they continue the affair, they believe they don't have any options, and unsurprisingly, they feel terrible. So here's the thing. If you tell your spouse that you are having an affair and you want a divorce, it is indeed possible that your spouse will have all kinds of feelings in response to that. But as strange as it might sound, it is not your job to prevent them from having those feelings or to relieve them of those feelings if they do have them. Your actions are your responsibility, for sure. But you don't have the responsibility to manage other people's responses to your actions. Did I say responses? Did I say that word? Other people's responses to your actions, because that's impossible. Their feelings are up to them. And this is really hard for us to accept, especially when someone that we care about is experiencing negative emotions and we think that we're the cause of those negative emotions. But here's the thing. As weird as it might sound, another person's emotional state is a neutral circumstance, meaning their emotional state does not automatically mean that you are a terrible person. Their emotional state does not have any inherent meaning. It is your beliefs that give their emotional state significance. And, we can all be forgiven for thinking these things because we tend to collectively believe that it's bad to feel negative emotions. But that's just a shared belief system. It's not an objective truth. And in fact, many great thinkers hold that negative emotions are an important, valuable, and worthwhile part of the human experience. And I firmly agree with that, even though I, of course, know myself how challenging it can be to experience emotional discomfort. But it's worth repeating, the richness of human experience comes from feeling the full spectrum of emotional possibilities, not just the easy ones. Okay, to be clear, all of this does not mean that consideration is not important. Saying that you are not responsible for other people's feelings does not mean that it's cool to be reckless with other people's hearts. But here's the thing, being in relationships with other people inevitably involves negative emotions as well as positive emotions. And it isn't your job to ensure that your partner never has a negative emotion. What is your responsibility is to take responsibility for your behavior to the best of your ability. And it's your job to deal with your own emotions. So this is something that comes up a lot too with people who are cheating. If you're putting off telling your spouse about your affair and asking for a divorce because you're afraid of how they are going to feel and how they are going to react, the real issue that you need to deal with is your inability to deal with your own feeling of fear. And you've got to own that. And a lot of people in this kind of a situation think that they're protecting their spouse from something that will hurt them by not telling them about what's going on with them. But what they're actually doing is trying to avoid their own discomforts. So you got to be able to bust yourself on that. You take responsibility for your feelings, and you've got to allow everybody else to take responsibility for theirs. And I know this is hard. I mean, I see this with my clients all the time. And I know that it's one thing for me to say this, and it's another thing to be the person who's actually doing this. And quite frankly, that's one of the reasons why working with a coach can be so helpful if you're in this kind of a situation.
Yeah, you articulated it really well to explain kind of the confusion I think that people have around these types of situations. But let's look at the other end of the situation. So the person who has been on the other end of the infidelity. So what does taking responsibility for your feelings look like if you're the person who's been, devastated by your partner's infidelity?
Yeah. So this applies to every situation in life, but especially to infidelity, perhaps, or being on the receiving end of infidelity. In any situation, you are entitled to feel whatever you feel in the moment. Whether you think your feelings are quote unquote reasonable or unreasonable, quote unquote positive or negative, quote unquote messy or neat and contained, you are allowed to have them. And no matter the magnitude of your feelings, they are okay. One of the things that I think we all need to do a better job of is allowing our feelings to exist in ourselves and others, and allowing ourselves to feel the most uncomfortable feelings we experience without resisting them or numbing them or trying to fix them right away. And we're not very good about that as a society. We're and as such, like
We're
as
good at the
individuals,
numbing. We're good at the numbing.
Yeah, we're good at numbing. Yes,
Yeah.
we are good at numbing. We are good at avoiding. We are good at resisting.
Many different ways. Right. Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
True. That's an excellent point. So we're not good at feeling the feelings.
Yeah.
But here, this is where it gets a little more complicated. Whatever feelings you have in whatever situation has come up, maybe it's about your partner cheating, maybe it's about something else, your feelings are legitimate, 100%. But your partner's behavior, your partner's cheating, or whatever the circumstance is not the cause of your feelings, and it's not their job to fix your feelings. And this is where a lot of people get really agitated because they believe that if somebody has cheated, they have done something wrong, and therefore it is up to them to make the situation better. And it's absolutely true that their behavior is their responsibility, past, present, and future. But whatever they've done and whatever they do or don't do going forward, what you think about their behavior is up to you, and it is your thoughts that will determine how you feel, period. Now, sometimes people who have been cheated on want to feel really justified in being angry at their partner, or want to claim a right to feeling hurt or betrayed or something along those lines. And that's okay. It's fine to think that way. It's okay to feel that way. However, if you want to feel better, that's not going to be helpful. Looking for ways of justifying your feelings is only going to ensure that you continue to feel those feelings. So some people say that, they're angry and they really want to feel better, but what they really want is to continue to believe that they're justified in thinking that they were wronged. And that's a different thing. So, to be clear, saying that your feelings are your responsibility doesn't mean that you should only have positive feelings. You don't have to edit out your uncomfortable feelings. You don't have to get rid of the so-called bad ones. But what all of this does mean is that if you want to feel better, you have to be willing to take responsibility for your feelings, even when something has happened that you don't like. Even if it's completely reasonable for you to have an unpleasant reaction to something like your partner cheating on you, for instance, if you want to feel better, you ultimately have to assume responsibility for your feeling state. That doesn't mean you have to stay with your partner. It doesn't mean you have to think that what they did is okay. It doesn't mean any of those things. It just means recognizing that when it comes to how you feel, you are ultimately the boss.
That's interesting. It's kind of like a reclaiming your authority, or taking ownership back.
Totally.
You work with, you coach clients that are on both sides of the equation.
Yeah.
But let's say that someone has been cheated on and they're hurt and angry, and they understand in theory that it's, the way that they're thinking about the situation that's created their feelings, but they just can't get past it, can't see any other way of thinking about their situation. So talk a little bit about how you help them, how you work with people in that type of situation.
Yeah, this is where the rubber hits the road. And quite frankly, this is why it's really helpful to have a coach, because in a situation where we are hurt and angry and we feel terrible and we don't know what to do about it, it can be really hard to figure out how we can look at a situation that we're unhappy about in a different way in order to ultimately feel better. And so this is a process that looks different for every individual. But I will say this, your first job is not to try and feel better. As awful as that might sound, it's true. Your first job is to allow yourself to feel however you feel. Your first job is to allow your initial responses to be whatever they are. And this may be really uncomfortable, but it is important. And if you allow yourself this opportunity, you will digest the experience and be in a position to make change much more quickly than if you resist, numb, avoid, blame, or attempt to do all of these things to manage your pain. Then, when the dust has settled a little bit, you can start to deliberately and intentionally decide how you want to think differently about what has happened. And what exactly you're going to think differently about looks different for everybody. But a general truth here is that there's more than one thing that is true or accurate about any situation or any slice of life, even if it's something like, your partner cheating on you. So this is hard for some people because they get stuck on the thought that, like, my partner should not have cheated on me. Well, guess what? It's happened. And continuing to, dislike or hate something that's already happened is unchangeable is going to feel terrible because you have no power over that. It's done. But when we can start to ask ourselves questions about why we are feeling the way we do and why we're thinking about things in the way that we are, we start to find a little bit more wiggle room. So the point isn't to go from thinking my partner cheated on me and they shouldn't have done that and I'm sad and mad as hell to no big deal, it's fine, I'm totally okay with this. We're not looking for that kind of a shift. We're looking for a way to see this situation in more neutral terms and maybe ultimately even in positive terms. So for instance, we might ask ourselves a question like, if the universe is kind, what part of this situation is good?
That's a powerful
Or
question.
what's that?
That's a powerful question.
Yeah.
Very powerful question.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And if you're religious, you can insert, something that is specific to your religion. Some people that I've worked with, have a very strong religious practice, and they ask themselves things like, if God is good, why did this happen for me? And that's a powerful one as well.
Yes.
Another way to think about it is, if someone I respected tremendously were in a situation like this, how might they think about this experience? Or what am I learning from this situation that I really needed to learn? Or, you might think, okay, this situation sucks, but how do I want to move forward in order to reclaim or claim the kind of life and love life that I really want to be living? So the overarching point here is that if you want to shift your feelings, you have to start shifting the story you're telling yourself about what happened. Again, this is something that coaching may be really helpful in addressing, but questions like the ones we just talked about are a powerful way that you can begin to shift your narrative on your own.
Yeah, those are great questions. A great way of, as you said, reclaiming or claiming ownership back for yourself. All right, so we've covered a lot. So sum all of this, everything we've talked about here today, if you would.
Yeah, sure. So Byron Katie, who is very famous, and she uses something called the work. We're not going to talk about the work, but she talks about 3 kinds of business in life. And I love this. The 3 kinds of business are as follows. There's your business, their business, and God's business. And when I say God, I take that to mean your particular version of God or the universe or the great whole or the great pumpkin or whatever. And what this means, what these 3 types of business point to, is that there are some things that you and only you can do, such as take responsibility for your thoughts and feelings and actions. Those things are your business and nobody else's business. And then there are some things that only other people can do for themselves, and those things are their business. And then there are some things that aren't our business or their business. They are the business of the universe. And for example, once something has occurred, once cheating has happened, that in a sense is the business of the universe. It is an event that's occurred. It's a neutral circumstance until we give it meaning. And there's nothing we can do to change it. So what we can do is decide how we're going to orient ourselves to our own business. We can't do other people's business for them. We can't change things that have already happened. But plenty of us spend a lot of time and energy trying to do exactly those other things. Most of us avoid our own business like crazy and instead try to get ourselves all up into other people's business, or criticizing them for doing their business in the way that they do. Or we rail against the way things are in the world, and we worry about situations that we can't control, or lament things that have already happened. But as attractive as it may seem to do those things at times, the only way to freedom is to do your own business. If you've cheated, you can take responsibility for your actions and for your own thoughts and feelings. If you've been cheated on, it may seem mighty attractive to blame other people or blame God or forces bigger than yourselves for creating this thing that's painful that's happened to you. But the best way to get through it is to deal with your own business, deal with your own thoughts and feelings, decide how you want to act going forward, and go forth. And you will heal and things will get better.
Dr. Murphy, that was really good summary. Thank you for summing up the conversation here today. I want to remind everyone who's listening, please go subscribe in iTunes or whatever player you use to listen to podcasts. We'd love it if you leave a rating and a review as well in iTunes or any other podcast player. And Dr. Murphy, where can people go to connect with you, reach out to you, or learn more about the work that you do?
Yeah, the best way to find me is through my website, mariemurphyphd.com.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for listening to Your Secret is Safe with Me with Dr. Marie Murphy. Make sure to click subscribe to get updates on our latest episodes.